Yeah, hello and welcome everybody. My name is Roland,
And I'm Rish.
and together we are talking about energy resources and how the world is changing around us today. Um, First thing first, Rish, you as an American, when I throw out the phrase America is energy independent, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts are America could be energy independent, but through legislation and the difference between certain branches of, the political leaning, that we legislate it to where we cannot be. I feel like we could be energy independent. We could also work with our neighbors to the north, Canada, Keystone Pipeline, one example. We could definitely be energy independent. We have the funds, we have the means. I feel like we have legislated ourselves out of energy independence.
Well, one thing that when I started reading up about on this whole topic was that there's a question of how do we define energy independence, and let's boil it down to, you mentioned Keystone Pipeline. Let's boil it down to petroleum resources. Um, at first, my question really was, one of the statistic bits that I read is the United States buys as much oil or roundabout as much oil from Mexico than what the United States is exporting to Mexico. So my question now is, in what kind of world does this make sense? Or maybe is there more to it? And what I
It's all
saw is,
politics.
yeah,
It's all
one reason,
politics.
exactly. One reason is politics. And what I want to say is it's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's put it that way. We are not going to the Mexicans and say, well, let's just send some oil back and forth. Yeah. So what we are doing on this way is, well, if you buy oil from us, we are buying X from you. If you are buying this from us, we can buy oil from you. So the whole trade arrangement is not, or possibly not, oil versus oil. It's a bit of a larger picture. The other thing is, and I found out when I was looking at Russian resource dependence or independence, and that they are now selling their oil to China instead of us. One part that I didn't know is that a large proportion of Russian oil, what you're doing with it, you're not refining it into gasoline, kerosene, diesel, what we are thinking about oil. A lot of that is refined to the point where it is their equivalent of heavy fuel oil. You know, the stuff they are using on the aircraft carrier when it's not in dry dock. So the chemical differences in oil, for example, could lead to, well, we are trading oil that the Mexicans need with oil that we need. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And to look at, in my opinion, looking at energy dependence or independence is, we need to take a step away from looking at we are selling or buying any kind of energy product or any kind of resource from another country. The question immediately that comes up for me is, well, what are we buying? Why are we buying? Under what conditions? And most of all, who is the seller? Yeah. So that is one thing from my European side. And yeah, I know where you're going next, and I'm really looking forward to it.
So, as an American, we've invested heavily in the fracking industry. America is the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. We just have more. The only country that rivals us in natural gas resources would be Russia. The difference is the world can sanction Russia, and this is a completely separate topic. The world cannot sanction the United States, and I would put that on the block as a discussion point. But the United States cannot be sanctioned. The global economy depends on the United States to such an extent to where we cannot be sanctioned effectively. It would be cutting off your nose to spite your own face. So when it comes to natural gas, there's been a lot of political discussions, and a lot of our natural resources have been locked up through legislation. So again, and I keep coming back to this, through legislation, we have made ourselves dependent on other nations. We could, in fact, through reversal of legislation, become energy independent. We could become an isolationist nation. It's well within our capability, but we have such a global footprint that it would disrupt everything.
You don't need to go as far as energy. One of the things that I was looking at is how did we come to this point? And that is because after World War II,
I was just fixing to say it comes back to World War II.
Yeah, number one, the only winner in World War II, the only real winner out of World War II was or is the United States. Period. Yeah, we don't even open the argument. The fact that there was zero destruction in the actual country that is the United States, and the fact
there
that
was actually proliferation.
Yeah, and that is the second part I was going to say.
From the war,
we or you Americans built this huge industrial complex to cope with the war effort, and they managed to turn civilian industry into a war industry and back. That is something that with production methods and production capability that no other country even could approximate. Yeah,
but from an engineering standpoint, it was incredible. It was almost turnkey. The way that we were able to retool our industry and then untool it back to the way it was honestly, from a purely engineering stance, was incredible. That is something that we excel about.
It contributed a huge part in the rebuilding and reconstitution of German industrial power. Yeah, the German Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle after World War I, is solidly based on the fact that the Americans financed with goods and money European rebuilding, abandoning the Morgenthau plan of turning Germany into an agricultural state, because everybody, including the Americans, realized if we don't utilize this huge resource and capability potential in the middle of Europe, Europe is going to have another war in 10 years. Yeah. And when you look at this kind of fact, the fact that between the end of World War II, and now, it was the United States backed world order that has enabled nations, for example, such as China and Russia, to safely trade their goods with the rest of the world. If that power was removed, if, just as hypothetically, saying the US Navy says we are no longer protecting shipping or navigating around the world in a certain area, Strait of Malacca, yeah, then China has a fucking problem. Because that is exactly where they get their resources from the rest of the world. And that is exactly where they are sending their products to the rest of the world. If that is no longer protected, well, lots of things could happen. We have seen at some point the piracy around Africa. That has never gone away. But at some point, it became a problem big enough that we were starting not only to look at it, but to do something about it. So the question is, if we remove that, start looking the other way, because, hey, we don't really have to. Yeah. For example, why is America not involved in the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran in Yemen? Because they don't give a damn about it. We don't, or Americans right now don't need Saudi Arabian oil because shale oil, fracking, we're good, thank you. Yeah. And those kind of resource developments in terms of, well, now we have shale oil, we have shale gas, we have fracking. The United States is, as you said, possibly the only country that could, to a large degree, become resource independent. Question is it politically desirable? Because making yourself dependent on other resources, for example, let's not go too far, let's say just a trading relationship between Europe and the US. It does not only put a dependency on the US, it also puts a dependency on Europe. And if we have a mutual dependency between countries that have, generally speaking, very similar views on how stuff should work, that is a relationship that is not a dependency in terms of, yeah, this could change. Yeah, this could be used against us. This is a dependency where, to the degree that one side is dependent, the other side is dependent as well. And yeah, in my book, that's fine.
See, and we're in regards to the Malkin Strait, that's why the U.S. has invested heavily with the country of India. India needs to have a strong Navy. It needs to have a strong Air Force. We have been sending them billions of dollars to invest in both. The idea is that India, since it shares a shared border with China, we're propping them up so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. The problem is there's so much corruption that the money doesn't always get to where it needs to go. But we have invested heavily, and the nation of India has also invested heavily in building a navy that it can be proud of. But you don't need to build a green water navy. You need to build a blue water navy, a navy that is able to traverse the seas and go wherever it is. And all of this is backed up by logistics.
Yeah.
An army marches on its stomach. The same is true with the Navy. It's just one word different. So you have to have the logistic capabilities to support your Army or your Navy beyond your borders. And that's something that China does not have right now. They do not have the logistic capability to support their Navy outside of its territorial waters. That's why they're a green water Navy. So we have invested billions in it. If you want to find out where the problem is, if you want to find out what we're concerned about as an American, if you want to find out what we're really trying to do, follow the money.
Well, it's not only in military capabilities. One of the things, and that is really, how to say, credible deniability comes into play here. But there's two things that stood out for me last year and the year before. And that was the news that Apple has built a huge, and I mean huge, production capacity in India. And automobile and automotive sector has invested billions of dollars in Thailand. Now, my question immediately was, well, why is Apple doing that? And rumors are that when you look at the production capacity they have there, what they say they have, and what some people say those capacities are, is that if you believe the optimists, or in a way the people that promote this kind of thing, is that the production capacity they have built and are building in India is more than capable not only to serve the Indian market, point one, but to completely take over the supply chain they currently have in China. There's also developments that suppliers of Samsung, Apple, and you name it, have been told, this is where we are going to build a factory. If you want to remain a supplier, this is where you build your factory. Now, this comes with an additional problem, because even if it is true, even that if that is part of moving our supply chain from China to a country that is, shall we say, politically, economically, financially, and medically more stable than what China can offer us right now, with the added benefit of being financially more lucrative for us to build a factory. As I said last time, a Chinese worker, according to Chinese statistics, costs me $15,000. Mexican worker costs me $10,000. It is way more productive. So what we are looking at, we are moving the problem from China to India, instead of saying, okay, we are moving the problem from China, India, wherever in Southeast Asia, and moving it back home.
See, in America, we actually have a saying for that. It's called kicking the can down the street.
Yeah, same here.
So, same problem. We're just going to kick it back a few years, and then we'll come back to it. But the problem with that is you keep kicking that can down the street until you hit a barrier.
Yeah, and that is the whole issue. What I see is the point I was making last time about these billions we invested in production capacity in China. We are now investing billions in production capacity, let's say, outside of China. And at the same time, we are looking at the potential of modernizing our production capacity to the point where you just look, where's the closest 3D printer that can handle this shit, and send it there, and logistics will do the rest. So domestic logistics in the US, not a problem. Production is expensive because of productivity and quality. Yeah, you have decision making that is essentially, like you said, kicking the can down the road until we can't. So,
but our decision making changes every 4 years.
Yeah, we are not moving our factory out of China. Well, first of all, more difficult to actually do it than to say it, because we have invested billions. We are not doing it because we have invested billions. It's not worth it. Then the next thing happens. Okay, it's still not worth it. And the next thing, it's not worth it. Yeah. At some point, you're reaching, and this is what I said with Martek's law. At some point, the discrepancy between where you are and where you should be is so large, the whole narrative collapses on itself. And instead of fixing the problem at the root cause, yeah, if you want to have control over your supply chain, you need to have control over your supply chain. Yeah.
But
so
it is a very American ideal. There is money to treat the symptoms, not to cure the disease, but there's curing the disease will make you this amount. Treating the symptoms will make you this.
Yeah. Well, I think from a European perspective is we don't want to look the facts in the eye, point one. Point two, we absolutely know what the problem is. I guess same with Americans, but to say it out loud, this is a problem, is politically not acceptable. It is socially not acceptable. And when truth becomes socially unacceptable, particularly when it's socially unacceptable, we do have a problem in our society.
But at the end of the day, facts do not have feelings.
And as Winston Churchill said during I think it was even during World War II, you can laugh at the truth, you can deny the truth. At the end of the day, the truth will still be there. Yeah, facts and truth, they don't care. And when I had a lot of these conversations with people about, well, the Russians are not really affected by the sanctions. They're just selling their stuff to India. To China. And I said, well, what are they selling?
But Russians
they can
have dealt with sanctions since the 1980s. I mean, they have plans in place to deal with sanctions.
Yeah, but
are they great plans? No.
You see,
do they have plans? Yes.
Worst case scenario.
So there's a lot in between there.
Worst case scenario. The Russians sell the raw materials to China. China uses the infrastructure it has. China is still the factory of the world and produces stuff. The next question for me is, well, who is going to buy it? If that was really the case, that China is going on about buying all the resources Russia can offer to deprive, well, basically to stick it up to us for sanctioning Russia for invading Ukraine. Yeah, let's just say this was a thing. It ain't, but let's just assume it. What is China going to do with those products? We have now legislation in the US, and it's going to come to Europe, and at an enhanced level, I might say, is any manufacturer has to conclusively prove that their product is free of Xinjiang slave labor. Even if a Chinese company,
that's a hard ticket to sell.
Even if the even if the Chinese manufacturer wants to comply with it, doesn't use slave labor, it is bloody impossible the way this is worded, then the way this can be used. So, and the point I'm going to make, yeah, maybe China has all the manufacturing capacity in the world right now. It is shut down because, yes, COVID did never leave China. Also, not a point for discussion. No, it was not brought back in from somebody else. It never left. And even if you have this capacity, if people simply don't buy from you for, yeah, admittedly, reasons of value. Yeah, I don't want to buy these goods because, yeah, it is still a fact. If somebody doesn't give you their money to buy your product, you don't have that money. And even, how to say, even communists at some point run out of other people's money. So there is this thing that even in the worst case scenario, looking at the demographic problems in both China and in Russia, Russia has very similar problems demographically speaking than what Russia has.
An aging population and not enough youth to provide for the elderly.
Yeah, it gets worse. I made a point when I was teaching in China is that even a bachelor graduate is part of a minority. 17% of people in China hold any form of degree. 17. And that, yes, that includes fake degrees admitted by Chinese Bureau of Statistics. And this is not how you run a 21st century economy, period. First of all, you need more qualified people. You need those qualified people not to run things by doctrine, but by education and logic. Yeah, then you have a functioning 21st century economy. You have a growing 21st century economy if these people have the freedom to do any kind of thing they want.
That's called a free market society.
Yeah, this is you need an entrepreneurial society, and in my over 40 years of experience. I have gone through a development of, when I was young, America was the place to look up to. Yeah. In my teens, things developed in a thing, yeah, Americans are not perfect. And then into, yeah, Americans do a lot of shit. It came back around to, yes, Americans have a point. Americans do a lot of great things. Yes, they're doing a lot of shit too. Yeah, from my perspective as a European. But you don't have this Chinese idea of societal harmony by stifling entrepreneurial thought, by constraining your society into certain acceptable behavioral standards. You get this entrepreneurial progressive society by having those, what you said earlier this morning about people that work 80 hours a week, and with the exact opposite of people that don't work at all, that doing crazy things.
Teaser. Yeah? That's an upcoming episode.
Definitely worth looking at it. But
so to speak on your comment, I would say that America, you know, you take white and black. America used to lean very heavily on the white, and this is not racial in any way, shape, or form. We used to lean on the right side, and we, as you said, we started doing some shit. So now we operate in the gray area with the white and black together. I feel like China is all on red, and you're either with the red or you're not with the red. You're either with the program or you're against the program. There is no room, there is no interpretation of the middle area. And as an American, I feel like America is exclusively operating in the gray area because we have done tremendous things for the planet. We've also dropped 2 nukes.
Like I said, you have done great things. You have done a lot of shit, but I can specify how things in China work. It is basically, if you are not government, you're nothing. You have no opinion of your own. If you have one of your own, it is better the same opinion that Chairman Xi has. And any kind of, even the slightest form of dissent is punished. So there is this one thing. They had this live streamer on Chinese YouTube or Chinese whatever it is called, and one of the things that his last live stream was, he had one of these blocks of foreign-made ice cream. We have this for decades in Germany called Viennetta. It's basically ice cream layered with chocolate layers, very thin chocolate layers, so it's crunchy. And they were sticking for decorative purposes a chocolate stick in it. And somebody with the power to make that decision thought this looks like a tank on Tiananmen Square. Yeah, I mean, totally obvious to you and me. And the way things work, that live stream immediately ended. And another thing that how tight the Chinese government controls the narrative and its people. One British journalist was testing the system as in on their version of Facebook called WeChat. He was sending out a message to the timeline, what you would call it on Facebook, that was very much disapproving of Chairman Xi's policy. He was arrested 7 minutes later.
See, now you made me think of a great point of discussion. I would argue the point or debate the point, depending on which verb you want to use. China does not have a government. China does not have a military. technically speaking, we'll start with the military first. China does not have a military. The PLA is technically the armed wing of the People's Liberation Army. They swear allegiance to the party first,
Yeah.
and China second.
Yeah.
So they answer to a government, which is the PLA, or the People's Liberation Movement. So technically, in all Western aspects, and speaking as an American, I would say that the government of China is illegitimate first. Their military is not their military of China. It is the arm wing of the People's Liberation Movement. Do they have capabilities? Absolutely. Do they have the manpower? Without a doubt. Do they have the equipment? It's sketchy, but is it effective in numbers?
That
Accuracy
is,
by volume.
well, first of all, you are spot on with the Chinese military, or the People's Liberation Army. It is the armed wing of the party, and it is there explicitly to
But
defend the party.
any military, any armed forces that swear to a party and not the country,
Yeah.
is not a military for the country. They are arm wing of a political movement.
Yeah.
Point blank, drop mic.
100% with you. And my point as a German, and I'm sure as an American you will agree to that, any government that is not legitimized by popular vote, yeah, by people like you and me saying, yes, I want this kind of government, and the majority and the consensus of that populace determines policy through elected legislators, is, you use the word illegitimate, I say it is detached from its people. It has no, possibly you could say there is no incentive for the government to work for the people, no matter how they are framing it in China.
Because they do not rely on the people for their basis of support.
Exactly. That is the thing. If power does not rest with the common people in the country, of the nation, then it is by default not or cannot be a free and a democratic society, no matter how you're framing this. The other thing about capabilities, and let's just say, why is the T-72 designed so badly? It is designed so badly because a monkey with a wrench can drive it and repair it. Yeah, it is possibly the most simple tank that you could ever conceive.
But I actually agree with that, because in America, in construction industry, we have the KISS method. KISS.
I understand.
Keep
KISS,
it
but
simple, stupid.
This it only goes up to a point. First of all, I have seen both militaries operate. This is basically the point I want to make is, during the Cold War, NATO and the US looked at the Soviet Union and the capabilities they said they had. And the way we dealt with this was, okay, how do we neutralize this capability with capabilities of our own? We can't match, under the pretext that we can't match the numbers. And our Western solution was quality. Yeah, quality of equipment and training of the individuals. So what we did was, we assumed, let's just say, just to put numbers on it.
You think you can do more, but we think we can do it better.
In a way, so we said, okay, this is what the Soviets can do. Let's assume they are not telling us everything, because they won't tell us everything. Yeah, military secret, and say they are 30% better than what they are saying they are. Okay, this is the capability we need to meet with the the a priori understanding of we don't have the numbers. So we need to do that via quality, right? So what we found out after the Cold War ended is that by day 7 of a potential NATO Warsaw Pact conflict, NATO armies would outnumber the Warsaw Pact by 3-1. In equipment, we would outnumber them 7-1. And that is the fact of number one, they couldn't field, transport, and equip the numbers in any reasonable amount of time to actually be effective in a war. Number
but that's
one.
one thing that America excels at. We can export war.
You see, the point is, America has 2,000 tanks. Let's just use this number. And you can transport them anywhere in the world. Russia has 10,000 tanks.
That is the key. We can move our equipment to wherever we want.
The 10,000
because it all comes back to logistics.
Exactly, the logistics and maintenance. So the 10,000 tanks Vladimir Putin has in storage somewhere in Russia are bloody useless in Ukraine because number one, they are not
like
well
T-62s. They're obsolete. They're basically an outdated artillery platform,
just as well as a T-90, and the T-90 is the most modern tank they have sent to Ukraine, and the T-90 is essentially a T-72 with a lot of upgrades.
So why don't you send them the Leopard 2?
Well, that's an overmatch. I keep saying that. I keep saying that this is an overmatch, and the Leopard 1s we are sending are more than a match for the T-72s. Second thing is training. We have so much more professionalism in Western trained soldiers, and that is why
it's a professional army. It's not an army of conscripts.
Even with conscripts, German conscripts were
I wouldn't call it. As an American, let me step in, and then you'll probably correct me, but my understanding is that you have a year's worth of military training by law. So
not anymore, but
I would not call that conscription, because you're not being forced to fight, you're being forced to train. So I would call that a military duty, or a country's obligation to its citizens to protect itself.
Well, the way military conscription worked in Germany was that I think within the first 3 months, you knew your shit. Yeah? You know how to march, you know how to salute, you know how to fire your weapon with certain accuracy. Then you get into specialty training, where you are going to the service branch or the service specialization where you could perform. So let's just say you are in the army. For the first couple of weeks, everybody does the same shit. So after that, you are going into your specialization. For example, I was supposed to go into army medical, combat medic. And you have people going into tanks. You have people going into logistics and all kinds of stuff. So this is, everybody in this army knows how to fight. Everybody in this army throughout the Cold War knew the moment they have to put on the uniform, the moment they are called back into the depot to be equipped. Well, first of all, we were able to, within hours, to equip 1 point something million soldiers, because we had the shit lying around. The other thing is, especially the Americans knew that. I think it's
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at a thought that I had.
Well, we have that stuff lying around. It's a fact. Yeah. So, and
well, in America, so America is 350 million people. In America, we don't have to go to the depot. Most Americans just go to their closet or their gun safe and we're just ready to go.
So, I mean, there's a difference between an armed civilian or an armed militia and professional soldiers. Yeah. But what I'm trying to point at is German conscripts during the Cold War. They knew if it's on, it's on, and it's a life or death matter. Yeah. So, and that's sort of the psychological part of it made German conscripts one of the best armies in the world. Yeah. So one of the things that one of my he had the privilege of serving during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah. And he worked with me a couple of years ago, and he said, look, we as conscripts, when I was in my basic training, we were sent to the middle of a forest where they had basically quarantined a place in the middle of the forest and said, okay, 2 of our special forces guys are hiding within the what we just sanctioned here, what we pulled a fence around, go find them. And they couldn't find them. So what happened was that my co-worker said, at some point I sat down on a tree stump and I started scratching my ankle. What happened is one of the special forces guys had dug a shelter under that tree stump and was putting his bayonet on this guy's boot. So like tick, 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 yeah, and oh, there are the guys. So, but the thing is, when you talk about professionalism in an army, is when you compare that, the Soviet Union, for political ideological reasons, overstated their capacities, and it's the same thing in China. They're telling us all these miracles they can do. When you look at it, the substantial stuff, we have done them 30, 40 years ago. Yeah, we as in the Western world. And I can only imagine any potential conflict. I mean, when China invaded Vietnam in '79, what did the Vietnamese do? They mobilized one division to protect Hanoi. The rest of the soldiers in the field were local militia. And they didn't have to get motivated to fight against the Chinese army. They were already there, and as you are saying, ready to go. They have, like you have an AR-15, they have the AK-47 in their closet. Yeah,
we actually have both. We're pretty big on immigration.
I mean,
so we have AKs, AR, HK, SKS.
Well, you need this two bullets, 2 types of bullets, and you can't fit them either way. But that said, when you take into consideration that the PLA is a force that the only battle experience they have is getting defeated. Yeah.
Well, and the only real world combat that they have is a border disagreement with India, where they've agreed to not use weapons as far as firearms. So they literally have people beating the shit out of each other with sticks and stones.
Yeah.
America has been in some form of combat, whether it's declared war or military action. Our military has been involved in conflict since Vietnam. Our veterans, our combat experience is at the highest level that can be achieved. China is the exact opposite. They are a paper tiger that has not been proven.
Well, when you look at that,
and Russia thought they had something, and look what the Ukrainians have done. Yes, well, the Ukrainians have been
training with the California National Guard for 20 years. Yeah, they have been preparing for this fight for 8 years, and every single meter the Russians have been gaining.
It's paying off.
Been paying off. And the Russians have
On
reverted.
paper, the Russians should have destroyed Ukraine 3 months ago.
Well,
on paper.
that was the idea
on
paper. But fact is, number one, they never had the amount of soldiers needed. They came with 180,000 soldiers. They would need 500,000
but
to
how many
successfully
were
conquer.
All of the Russian forces are not professional military.
Well, legally they are conscripts that have signed a paper. They are now professional soldiers. So, but
signing a piece of paper does not make you
question.
a professional soldier. Yeah. Can we agree on that? Yes or no? Can we agree on that?
I think that's pretty obvious, basically on the performance. And moreover, once they have seen they can't conquer the place with 180,000 soldiers, and they don't have the 2 million manpower they need to occupy it, they have resorted to a warfare where they basically obliterate a certain area with artillery, move the artillery 100 meters forward, and do the same thing again. And yet, every single meter, soldiers, boots on the ground, are occupying or conquering at this stage of the war is paid in tens, if not hundreds, of dead Russians.
But and see, they that's have not that
sustainable.
From my perspective, the end goal for Russia would be to occupy, firstly, to create a land bridge to Crimea, to secure naval ports in the Black Sea so that they can expand from there, work out a deal with Turkey to get their warships into the Mediterranean. But I think the end goal for Russia would be to occupy the land bridge to Crimea and then occupy the Donbass region strictly because of its natural resources so that Russia can maintain its monopoly on natural gas in the European theater.
There is a huge consideration.
There's no reason to take Kiev. There's no reason.
Well, there is a reason to take Kiev because.
But it's only political. It's only political.
It is going to impact. It is going to impact. When you see, especially after you've seen the performance of the Russian army for the last 3 months, and the fact that even if you occupy or limit your occupation to the Donbas region, there is no way the Ukrainians would ever let you extract the resources for your own benefit. Whether you are selling it to somebody else or using it yourself, doesn't matter. The Ukrainians won't.
But you need the Crimean ports. You need the coastal region to export your goods.
Yeah, and both are within the reach of Ukrainian forces. We have now, over the last couple of days, seen the first offensive real offensive of Ukrainian troops. And when you see the strategy, how it translates into battlefield action, the Russians just keep blasting their way forward, yeah, and they are running into all kinds of obstacles. The next thing that I would be concerned about if I was on the wrong side of this is well, those barrels of those guns have a usable life. Yeah, let's say you can fire 5,000 rounds before that barrel deteriorates so far that you have
more likely 15,000.
I mean, whatever number you are using, we are close or beyond that point. Yeah. And the Russians must know at this point, if they withdraw their artillery to be to have the guns rebored, yeah, or relined, they are losing basically the only thing that have kept them in this war. As you were saying, the tanks they are now fielding are completely obsolete, and if the numbers are anywhere near the truth, the Russians have lost more than 2/3 of their active tank force. They have lost, if the numbers are any truth to that, over 40,000 people, men in their armed forces. Yeah, and this is not a conflict that is in any way sustainable. Yeah,
It's not a sustainable business model, and if it don't make money, it don't make sense.
it's not about money. But if you want to boil it down to money, let's just look at the resources that they can potentially extract, and let's attach a monetary value to that. All the shit they are losing right now, every single day, and especially in terms of people, when they have a demographic problem of magnanimous proportions, actually, yeah, it's not going to help them. So there are analysts that say this is the only time Russia can go for it, but the way things are going are suggesting this is the end of Russia as a state. The same person said to me 15 years ago, Russia is a gas station that thinks it's a country. And I mean, the way things are going with in any totalitarian system, you start to deviate from what is really going on. Yeah, as again, Martek's law, it can be applied in a lot of scenarios outside of technology where it comes from. And the later this collapse of the narrative comes, the harder it comes. So right now in Russia is the military veterans are calling for declare war and mobilize the country because this is not sustainable. And their idea of finishing this war is throwing enough people at the problem. Similar thing what is happening in China. They won't get out of those lockdowns affecting their own economy because it's a political decision that is made based on very selective interpretation of the data. Yeah.
So let's take selective interpretation. All of Russia is not invading Ukraine. It's European Russia.
Yeah.
There is 70 different languages from what I've seen that are spoken in Russia. The main political base is based on the Slavic race. And the Slavs are in Western Europe. They're the ones doing the fighting. The west of Russia, they don't have 5G. They don't have cell phones. I mean, there's pockets of places where there is like a communications hub, but I would argue the point that 2/3 of Russia doesn't even know that they're in a war.
Yeah. Same. I was going to make exactly that point. How many of the Russians, yeah,
and
whether
the
they
other
are
2/3,
Yakutians, Siberians, or whatever they
would
want
not go. They would not go from herding reindeer and living a subsistence lifestyle where they live off the land, they herd, they gather, they farm. They're living a rural agrarian lifestyle. Those people are not going to put down the plow and pick up the AK for a people who are not only culturally different, racially different, linguistically different. Apologize, I have trouble pronouncing some words. You're different in 3 different areas, and you care nothing about expansion. You live an agrarian lifestyle. What would convince you to put down the plow and pick up the AK?
No,
nothing. Nothing. You're only thinking about your family, your food, your water.
This is survival level. And
area.
Interestingly, I was going to make that point the other way around with Americans in Vietnam. And the thing is, these people, they will fight for only one reason, and that is if their living is threatened. Yeah. And
way of life.
The problem is what you have in Russia is information control nearly to the degree how it is controlled in China. So and even people that have access to outside information in China, and I say that as someone who lived there, I know so many Western people that after a while living in China completely absorbed the narrative. The problem is the persistence and the isolation of the information flow. And it is more convenient to just accept what you're being told as long as you have food, as long as you don't have to worry about to live on the next day. It is, yeah, in one way you could term it lazy. Yeah, you're
First
not
world
going out there.
problems.
Yeah, but it is the case. And on the day when the US went into Vietnam, people that were using their heads must have known conclusively that they are not going to win this fight. Yeah, there is. I just bought this book, and a little bit of advertising here for an American that said this in the 1980s. The book The Perfect War really goes through this whole difference in appreciation of the situation, that even under the most optimistic scenario, American forces never met the goals they should have met in order to win this war. And that consecutive American administrations knew that. And one of the major reasons why they still made the decision to go into Vietnam was to say to the Russians, yeah, we know, but we don't need that. We're going to do it anyways. So in such a scenario, you don't underestimate political indoctrination combined with selective information flows. Let's call it that. So completely different topic to describe how this is working.
No, but proxy wars. So obviously China and Russia contributed on the opposite side of Americans in Vietnam, but we also supplied Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen in retribution in Afghanistan.
Same thing.
It's tit for tat, but when it all boils down to a single point, you're playing with actual people. You're playing with human lives, and we have gotten, not we as America, we as Homo sapiens, the species, we have really fine-tuned the way to kill our own self.
When you go throughout human history, during times of war, human genius, it is genius, but it was.
So Cain killed Abel with a club.
Yeah, go from there.
America killed Nagasaki with a nuke.
Yeah, we have been highly inventive in methods of killing more people with less input throughout the history of humankind.
Efficiency.
Yeah, and as not ironic, as dehumanizing this is also a fact. What I was going at with don't ignore the information availability or restriction, and I partly lived through this. Is it is common knowledge now for anyone who wants to look it up that the Chinese government knew for between 1 and 3 weeks that this virus, COVID, is contagious human to human. And it boils down to 4 political reasons. They were uncooperative with the World Health Organization. They made up all these narratives to blame anybody but themselves. And when you look at how this went down, even when a Chinese doctor reported it, number 3, the doctor was punished, not in any form was any kind of action taken until it could no longer be covered up. So after the initial lockdowns, the narrative was we are COVID-free because Chinese Communist Party, every other country, the democracy is so shit, they all have COVID, ha ha ha. Then COVID cases. Or it's foreigners bringing COVID back to us. And I had this conversation with people telling me, oh, it's you foreigners that are bringing it back. And I said, well, any foreigner that is coming here, or all the foreigners that you see, they lived here during COVID. They did not go out. The foreigners that are coming in, the very few that are allowed in, number one, have a job, have potentially lived here already, and they are going through quarantine for 4 weeks. It is not possible that you get COVID from a foreigner. Then the next narrative was, oh, it's from foreign imported food. Not happening. Any scientist in the world says that's not happening. Yeah. So and this is when I realized in my head the truth doesn't matter in this narrative. It is politically decided what the truth is. Yeah. And that is why
history books are written by winners.
Yeah, but the Communist Party is not going to come out as a winner. When you
So,
see
the history books for now will be written one way, but in the long run, I mean, take it 100 years, 500 years, a millennia.
My question,
the books will be written as they're written.
My question for that would be, if there was any truth to the survival of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, at this point, factually, you can't argue against it. You have all these problems in China which are not being addressed. You have then a narrative that is collapsing around the party. And honestly, I don't think any of the decision makers knows what to do. And if they know what to do, is they know they're just going to make another problem worse. So they are in this situation. They can't ask for foreign vaccines because loss of face. They can't stop the lockdowns because millions would die. And I mean millions that they can't hide. Yeah. So the next thing is all these issues and being covered up for a prolonged period of time. And people in China start seeing there's a difference between the narrative and what is happening around me. I have friends in Shenzhen, and I said, oh, I heard there is COVID cases. Shenzhen is being locked down. They were denying it is happening because it was not happening to them. So even when you live in those segregated communities, you don't even know that the other compound on the opposite side of the road is locked down. That is how much they are controlling the narrative. The problem is when the truth is so widespread, people are seeing I'm under lockdown. This is happening. That is happening. And my question then is, if there is really this total control, is why are these news even coming out of China? Why is the frequency of these news coming out of China increasing? Why are we having high-level government leaks? Not only those Xinjiang files, yeah. Over the last 2 months, there have been several occasions where top secret ultra-level documents, internal party documents, are being leaked to Western media. They are being accurately translated by people in China and put out to the world to see this is what's really going on. Yeah. And when you are at that level of an authoritarian state, that people, normal people, are no longer believing the narrative, potentially actively contributing to the opposition to that narrative, whether it's by protesting in front of your bank because you can't get your money, because you're protesting against lockdowns. One thing that is very popular right now, they are attacking and smashing up those testing stations that are everywhere across China. And you can't tell me this is happening in a country where societal harmony exists, where the government is secure in its place. If you're telling me, on the other hand, there is a lot of problems that we haven't even seen yet that are happening right now, and that will change not only China but the world, then yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. And I like to recall the situation at the end of the Cold War. The day the Berlin Wall came down, or the day that the Soviet Union collapsed, up until that event happened live on TV, people like me were afraid to get nuked the very next moment. Yeah, I'm exaggerating, but this was the case how we lived in the 80s. And there was not even a crack on the outside of the Soviet Union. Yeah, and bam, it collapsed. Because the system went far beyond its use-by date. And that is the thing, how China will change, how the world will change. And we started to see these kind of things now more prominently, I think. So in terms of going back to our very original topic, energy and resources, we will always find different use for resources. Yeah, when the Kaiser comes.
Yeah.
High Rish stock.
Kaiser.
Kaiser, you are on live TV. What do you say about that?
Kaiser.
Not fast, is he? Yeah, I mean, when you look at it from this point of view, Europe has made the mistake of becoming resource dependent from with a country that has not our best interest at heart, that does not have the same values that we subscribe to in Germany, in Western country as such. And yes, mistake.
No, they've laid in bed with a totalitarian government.
Yep. I think it was Kissinger who said, in the history of the United States, we strongly opposed one totalitarian system and it collapsed. We financed another one. We can see what is happening and there is no debate about which way was better. So, and that's how more and more people are feeling about this thing. And let's just say at the point I was making with resources, even if the situation with Ukraine and Russia was resolved this very moment, and that the Russians are offering, well, we turn the gas back on. What we should be doing is go F yourself. That's what we should be doing. And I say, yes, people were afraid to get nuked the very next moment in the 80s, but as a German, when you have
12 minutes to midnight.
Yeah. If you have a wall between people, you always knew which side you always know which side you're on. Walls have advantages. Yeah. And I'm saying that as a German who very well know that that wall was in our country. Yeah. And that if that Cold War had gone hot, it would have been in Germany. But the point is,
And
I have
Poland.
been, well, not so much in Poland. I think by the time we would have reached the Polish border, the matters or the Soviet Union would have collapsed as well.
Poland's geography lends itself to tank warfare, and America had so many tanks, so many artillery divisions and mechanized divisions that Poland would have needed to be a throughway.
Well, essentially, the Poles would have stepped aside if American tanks started rolling across the border, because
no, they would have said this way.
Yeah,
keep going.
Exactly. Especially in the 80s. In the 80s, the Poles were done with communism. Yeah, were done with the Russians. I mean, not that they had ever any kind of sympathy, for the Russians. The first thing the Polish nation did after World War I was have a war with Russia or the Soviet Union. So there is that. And my understanding or my knowledge of this whole thing is I know from someone who knows when the Eastern German army was integrated in the Western German army, they started to share with the Eastern German generals mobilization plans from way back in the day. Yeah, so nothing as in this is the stuff we would be doing now. And they looked at the logistics plans for getting NATO soldiers to the front line and at the same time evacuate civilians, away from the danger. And one Eastern German general supposedly said in this meeting that hypothetically never happened, it wouldn't be 7 days to the Rhine, but 18 days to Moscow. If the fighting ability and logistics is as good as the transport logistics, that's what it would have been. And no, I'm not a person that says, hey, let's find out. Yeah, it's terrible what's happening in Ukraine, but at this very moment in time, we as the Western world, we can't choose to have this fight or not. The only way we won't have this fight is rolling over. And like hell, that's going to happen. So I have been
got two new countries just joined NATO.
Oh, I think that is the biggest thing for the Russians or for Putin is that countries that traditionally are neutral and want to stay out of this are actively seeking NATO membership.
We're one Switzerland short of getting all of Europe.
Well, that's that. You see, with Finland, one of my extended
900-kilometer border with Russia,
and they can put more trained men in the field than Germany, France, and Benelux together. So, welcome to Finland. So
now, Finland, I will say, Finland has a very, very respectable Air Force. They have modern jets. They have trained pilots. Finland's Air Force is extremely respectable.
And since you are raising this topic, the Finns are very peaceful people. The Swedes are neutral, but two things about Sweden. Number one, they are joining NATO. They are taking sides. How much do you have to piss off Sweden to take sides in a war? Second thing,
ask Vladimir Putin.
Opinions are in. God thinks he's a jerk. But the other piece of information I want to put out there is Sweden is the country with the highest negativity rating for Russia and China. Over 90% of the people in Sweden have a negative view of China. I think it's 93%, to be exact. And I mean, how much do you have to fuck up to turn one of the most liberal countries in the world against you? How much do you have to fuck up? I mean, the other thing I can say is, well, invade another country. Yeah, but these are the things that are telling me is that, yeah, Western people are coming around to the fact that, well, you can't argue with the Kaiser. Yeah, but people are coming around to the fact that engaging with a country.
I'm doing my show. Kaiser, go downstairs. Go.
Going like that. Western people are coming around to the fact that in its current form, both governments are not our friend. The German idea of if we are engaging with them, if we are exchanging with them, this is going to be like we have resolved our long-standing differences with the French. Yeah. No, it's not going to happen. Even with the Dutch, it's getting much better these days. But even with the Belgians, with the Poles, with God knows who, yeah, these issues that we are facing as one country with another, yeah, have not resulted in better relationships through trade. We have not managed to get real change in Russia or China. And we need to come around to the fact that this is not going to happen in the next 50 years as well. So instead of trying to do the impossible, I think moving the supply chain out of China, step one. And as I was saying, Cold War, yeah, so be it. It's not a decision that one side takes. Yeah, it is
two to tango.
It takes two to tango, and if one side actively makes that decision through action, yeah, then the other side can continue to do the impossible, or they can realistically appreciate the situation and say, okay, fine, you don't want to play according to the rule book everybody accepts, then we don't play with you.
Well, it sounds like that's an episode.
Yeah, sounds good. So next episode, how America and Europe will re-establish the transatlantic friendship.
It's one of the episodes to come.
One of the episodes to come. Well, then
I'm
you
Rish.
stay hydrated. You stay
He's
well.
Roland. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.